Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears, ladies and gentlemen. You are tuned to the MC Lars podcast. This is episode 62. Whoa, it is Monday, November 4th, 2019, and I am coming to you from the great country of Russia. I played Moscow last night with John Thatcher Longley, flying back home to the United States today, but I thought I'd post a little podcast, and here we are. This episode is brought to you by the Patreon supporters, the Larsons. Shout out to the new ones, Jesse Ray, Andrew Davis, and Marcy. Shout out to the old ones, Justin Glaive, Prague Gator, and Catherine. Thank you all for supporting this project and supporting the Patreon. I am doing songs about all the movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This month I do Iron Man and Iron Man 2, which means I get to do different characters within the universe. It's going to be tight. It's going to be joyful. It's definitely worth checking out. I'm excited to do all sorts of songs about all sorts of surprising things, including The Incredible Hulk, which is kind of canon and not. The first one with Ed Norton. It's dope. It's exciting. So this is a cool project. Speaking of nerdy music, this week I talked to Z from Hipster, Please, a dude who's been reporting on the nerdcore movement really since its inception and before. We kind of talk about his work as a writer, the evolution and de-evolution of the genre, how it kind of had this interesting second wave and third wave, and it was very cool to talk to him about his perspective. So check this out, and thank you for listening. Here we go. This is Z from Hipster, Please. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Z from Hipster Please, a legend documenting the nerd culture revolution for a very long time. We were just talking about it. How long have we known each other? Like 13 years?
Something like that. Yeah, we met, when was the first time I saw you? 2006, 2007, maybe? It was one of your early tours, and we met at a place in Spartanburg, South Carolina, called Ground Zero, little local punk dive club that is weirdly enough has sort of a historic landmark for the local music scene.
Was I with Fred a lot, or was I with the punk bands?
You were touring with your backup band at the time, and I want to say you had some local like death rapper.
Yeah.
Who was your local opening act?
I know what you're talking about. It was 2008, and it was
2008.
It was a one-off because we were on this college tour, this corporate college tour.
That's what it was.
And his name was Jubby F.U. I'm not going to say it. And he was. We've laughed about him for years.
I was tiptoeing around the name myself. Yes, yes.
Hey, so you were like probably one of the three people at that show.
And I think the other two people rode with me. So really, it worked out well for all of us.
So you saw Wesley Willis there too? Is that what you were saying?
Oh man, I have seen everybody at that club. Yeah, I saw Wesley Willis a couple years before his unfortunate passing, also at that club. I saw David Allan Coe at that club. Like it's literally just the weirdest sort of top to bottom of contemporary and historic musicians there. It's a weird place, and apparently it's still around. It kind of goes dormant for a couple of years, and then it comes back. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess Municipal Waste and Sick of It All are playing at Ground Zero. Guess I'm driving there.
That's dope. I remember it was pouring rain that night.
It was horrible.
It was so wet.
It was disgusting.
There's this thing that comes with being a creator or being someone who wants to connect with people. You can't put a monetary value on these memories, right? And on these things. And it's funny how you mentioned some names that like maybe at some point in their career would sell 1,000 tickets in Manhattan, and some point sell 3 tickets in Spartanburg. And like, it's really hard to quantify the success of a life of a creative person. And you being as someone who's been creating for so long, like what are some ways you can quantify success?
I kind of butt up against that a lot because I've learned after a point that I don't look at my like read and listen statistics, because at some point there's either going to be way too much and I'm going to be intimidated, or I'm going to be talking to 4 people and I'm going to be disheartened about it. So I just try to, have kind of made peace with whoever's out there reading or listening. I just want to, connect with them. I want to help them with whatever their story is attached to this music or this art or this movement or this thing.
Yeah.
And it comes back to the memories. I remember, I don't think it was that show. I think it was when you and Whitey were touring. There was a kid at the merch booth who wanted to buy a t-shirt and he didn't have the money. And you said, "That's cool, man. You can get me when I'm back." And I'd never seen an artist do that. I'd never seen, even, growing up, going to like punk and metal and underground hip hop gigs. Like that was just, and I was like, that's MC Lars to me. That is, and that's why I do it, because you get these glimpses of people not just as creative entities, but just as, the cool human beings that they are.
Oh, thank you. That's a cool story. I appreciate that. I do that a lot, and especially when it's a kid who really wants it, and then they have a reason to come see you, and maybe they'll bring 2 friends.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, and I think that's the reason why guys like you and Ran and Front like continue to do this, because you understand that there's more to it than unloading the van, doing your set, selling a CD, going home. Yeah,
right. That's true, because that is, anyone could do that, I guess. I mean, not anyone, but it's like you want to. My whole thing has always been about trying to inspire people,
Yeah.
Create more, consume less. And that's why I love Wesley Willis so much, because he was just this cosmic, energetic guy who just could not stop creating. It was his therapy. I relate to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and anybody who has those struggles, be they, mental health or addiction or any bad thing that is dragging you down, if you can use art to not just, come past that, but to inspire you through your struggle, like, that's amazing. That is the most phenomenal thing a human being can do, in my opinion, is to turn that into gold. And then inspire other people to create their own art to be similar. Exactly. There you go. You have been such a proponent and supporter of nerdcore as a genre. I think of you kind of as Cameron Crowe in Almost Famous. Being there at all the moments and basically being one of the facets of the scene. The nerdcore Legs McNeil. It's sort of like we have this belief that history is written by the victors, but I think mostly history is just written by the guys who were standing around watching. Right. I'm one of those guys. Yeah. And writing about and being flexible with your platforms, because you've been on. You still run, you have a blog, right? Through your site? The blog mostly is now just a repository for the new podcast. My writing at the moment is more or less limited to the stuff at Geek Dad, which is, again, a job I fell into back when it was a Wired blog, just because of my connection to nerdcore and video game music and stuff. Wow. So let's talk about that. So how did you first get introduced with the people at Wired? That sort of starts out with Hipster Please, my blog. It was, I guess, 2005, and I was young and newly married and had a kid, and writing is free. So that became what I did. I like to write, and one of the things I've always loved since I was 9-10 years old was music. I've always been a music guy, so that was what I started writing about. And it just so happened that also lined up with Frontal Light's first tour, with the whole wonderful volatile madness that was the Rhyme Torrents community. Like, all that stuff was going on at the same time, so I just sort of fell backwards into writing about this. Yeah. And out of that grew Radio Free Hipster, a podcast that I named by accident. And at some point I ended up I got a bad tattoo. I got a D20 tattoo that Doc Pop ended up pushing to one of the culture and sharing blogs, and a bunch of people saw it, and some of the people saw it happened to work for the Geek Dad blog at Wired, and they figured out I was a dad, and they're like, "Hey, come write about weird stuff for us."
Wow. So so it was your tattoo that helped get
That's
you
right.
that gig.
So I guess my key is all right, kids. Go to shows, get tattoos. That's it. That's the key to success.
So
I've
yeah.
cracked it wide open for you.
How many tattoos do you have?
Oh, just a couple, just 2 or 3. I'm just still working on my right arm. I grew up. My dad was a biker, so I grew up around tattoos. It was just sort of a thing, but I've tried to be a little more selective than perhaps my father was about what I adorn my body with.
So are you originally from South Carolina?
I am. I was born and raised in the upstate of South Carolina.
So being a geek, tech entrepreneur, nerd, what was that like growing up? Like back before the internet was cool, it was cool to be a nerd. Like, did you ever feel like an outsider?
Oh, definitely. I think anybody that grows up in a sort of, homogenized culture, like a small town that doesn't necessarily click with whatever that dominant culture is, kind of feels like an outsider. But you kind of grow through that, I think. And then suddenly there was the internet, and you realize that there are people being alone just like you all over the place. So I think it's culturally, I think it's a really amazing leveling mechanism. The fact that we can all talk about this weird stuff now.
And the longevity of it, like the fact that many years later, there's an interesting thing about Shakespeare's sonnets where he tells the story of this person he loves, and the fact that he does it for many years, he talks about how that animates the person in the reader's imagery.
Yeah.
And I think it's similar with the podcast medium and with all the indie nerdcore stuff and any kind of progressive, like long form content, because you get to see, like, you experience the life of these things and the depth of them. And like, it takes people like you documenting and connecting the threads to like, to kind of spin the animation wheel, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and it's great, like kind of being a first person observer of that. Like that, it's interesting to me to see how you have changed, artistically since your early days. Because you were originally the post punk laptop rap guy, like, and that's how I came. I came into MC Lars Horace, and just to kind of see how you've expanded on that and the other elements that you've brought into that, to me, is fascinating. And now, you and Ran are making this beautiful lit hop opus that is Dewey Decibel. So it's fun for me. Like, that's, if you have a passion for music, then it's hard to not have a passion for people who make music. So it's fun to see where they go with their careers and how they change and what elements they bring in and how they sort of gravitate as they move forward.
Thank you. That I didn't expect that. I wasn't trying to fish for compliments, but that's a really nice compliment. I appreciate that, Z.
No, let's say, Lars, you know that I, and I think most people who have been around you for the last decade, like, you are a guy that I think we all universally sort of hold in high regard. You're Lars.
Thank you.
You're a talented musician, and you're also just a super nice guy that really wants the people that enjoy his art and that come to his shows to have a good time. And that's, to me, that's noble. That's all you can do as a human being, is to try to maybe alleviate a little suffering.
Right. Yeah.
Life is hard. Enjoy things. Help people enjoy things.
And that's why, along those lines, if there's less positive ways to do it, that's why the pharmaceutical companies have done so well, and you know what I mean? All the, yeah.
Exactly.
All the, so that's cool. Well, thank you, man.
You're welcome, brother. You're welcome.
I wanted to talk. I didn't tell you I wanted to talk to you about this, but I want to talk about it. I thought this would be a cool opportunity, part of our interview, to have an oral history of nerdcore as a movement from your perspective and me trying to fill in the blanks, because you've met and interviewed so many of the original people. You've been there through it all. And if you don't mind, I'd love to talk to you like about that, to have this on record, Oh,
no, man, definitely. Let's do it. Lars, I know why I'm here, man. You're not fooling me. I get why I'm here. No, but no, I guess we start talking about nerdcore. Nerdcore, like heavy metal or punk or ska, occurs in waves. And sometimes they are Sometimes they're linear and sometimes they're not. And I think nerdcore really kind of starts with a handful of OGs, with a handful of guys like you, Front a Lot, MC Chris, Whitey Cracker are kind of the ones I tend to refer to. And then also widening the circle, Optimus Rhyme, which was kind of a different animal because they were more of a funk rock band that also had an MC.
Yeah.
But you guys are sort of, and again, there were people, Paul Barman, there were a lot of people before that. But when you think of, I guess, nerdcore as a movement, for me, that's the center of the atom. And then I guess the circling that, like, are people that were directly inspired by guys like you and Chris and Wheelie. Beefy comes to mind. Ultra Klystron. And those guys made up the core of what I kind of think of as the Rhyme Torrents generation, which again is sort of a blessed and cursed history that we all share.
That's like the second wave, if you're talking about waves. Maybe.
Yeah, that's the second wave. But then something really cool happens because rather than a third wave, you kind of have this nerdcore lost generation. You have people like Mega Ran, who was just, an underground rap cat who'd been doing it for a while, who transitioned into the Random at the time, who transitions into like Mega Ran as a persona. You have guys like David N80 from Dual Core, who started out in Ohio in like Scribble Jam, that gets involved in hacking and IT and brings that into his art. And and to me, like, that's part of the coolness of it, is that it's not so cut and dry. There are waves within waves.
It's like MC Hawking said on the podcast when I interviewed him. He said, "Nerdcore is like obscenity. You know it when you see it. You know it when you hear
exactly.
it."
I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it. Yeah, that's it. That, once again, I think Hawk is dead on. Well, see, and Hawking is one of those guys that was doing it early on. More as a gag, I think, than a lot of guys. And that's another thing, is we have content versus intent with nerdcore. Like, some people are nerdcore because that is a niche that you're trying to fill, and some people are just nerdcore because, like, there's a whole group of like Canadian MCs, especially, that I consider to be nerdcore adjacent.
Yeah,
Jesse Dangerously is not nerdcore, but he's kind of in there.
Right.
Word Burglar is not nerdcore, except for that he kind of is. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah, I like the Hawkman's take on it, though. You know it when you hear it.
And so what years are we talking about? Like, let's talk about chronology.
We are talking early 2000s up until 2000, between 2005 and 2008, I think, is sort of peak nerdcore. That's when the movers and shakers are moving and shaking.
And so when did you first hear about Front a Lot, and was that your first exposure to the term?
Oh, that was definitely my first exposure to the term. And that was early 2000s, back during his song fight days. That was the cool thing about the commercial internet, where there were these weird little pockets where very interesting and in some cases niche music was being made that if you didn't know about it, maybe you never heard about it. But yeah, Song Fight was like an online song competition, and that's really kind of where Front cut his teeth. And out of that grew, MC Front a Lot, the nerdcore superhero that we know and love today.
And the Penny Arcade people were close with the Song Fight people, or they somehow discovered him, right? That's how?
Yeah, the Penny Arcade guys had Front playing before PAX was this big cultural thing that it is now. It was basically this very punk rock operation where they would throw these little like gaming expos in, I don't know, parking lots or something, and they would have musical guests, and they were a lot of kind of your early nerdcore and geek rock guys. Front a Lot was there. Darkest of the Hillside Thickets, which is a Canadian group that are a H.P. Lovecraft themed band.
Oh wow, I need to check them out.
Oh, Lars, they have been together forever. Torrin Atkinson is kind of the front man and the nucleus of that. And again, super nice guy himself. But yeah, that it's weird how kind of all those worlds collide.
I don't know if you heard my interview with Perry from Nerf Herder, but he talks about on my podcast how they came up with the term nerdcore in the early 90s as a response to these bands from Oxnard, punk bands from Oxnard called it Nardcore.
Nardcore. Yeah, I remember that.
So they were like, well, we're a Star Wars reference named band. We're going to call it nerdcore. And that's what they used to describe their music as. And so that's always in interviews. Like we were on WBR in Rochester and I told that story and Frontalot was like surprised and flabbergasted and didn't believe it. But so I guess what we're talking about, nerdcore is a invention of nerdcore hip hop is kind of what we're talking about with this.
Yeah, we're talking about I guess nerdcore with a capital N, which kind of was spawned by the MC Frontalot song of the same name.
Yeah, and Perry from Nerf Herder was like, when he heard that Frontalot was doing that, he was like, oh, that makes sense. They can have it. I'm not going to fight them. And
again, I've met Perry and spoken with him a little in the past, and that's a very Perry approach to things. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's good. Good for him. Good for him.
But I always want to make that part of the history, make it clear because me coming from a punk rock background and being from California and stuff, I always felt like California punk rock was always a little weird and a little different. And so that makes sense,
definitely. Well, and there's always, and that's a thing I think that endures in nerdcore hip hop in its kind of modern incarnation is there's still a lot of that punk rock DIY ethic at play. And a lot of times out of necessity, but you guys make it work.
Right. Yeah. That's nice, man. And I think also because none of us, this is cool because we're getting the chronological perspective, the human stories, the geographical stories. And so Frontalot is from Berkeley, but he went to Wesleyan and then stayed on the East Coast.
Yeah, he was, I guess, based around Brooklyn at the time. And I don't think he uses it anymore, but he used to have this tag where he would, like in intros and stuff, where he would be MC Frontalot, the first rapper to ever come to the genre from musical theater.
Right.
Because he and Gabby Alter, his, kind of longtime collaborator and keyboardist, were, musical theater guys. Yeah. I on my last podcast I actually closed with a song from Young Zombies in Love, which is a musical they wrote in the sort of what would chronologically also be the early days of Front's sort of nerdcore innovation.
And that he had, you make a good point. He had people around him who were musically talented who helped make it not just kind of ironically rapping over canned beats, making it a whole production thing. And I feel like he had that, MC Chris had that, especially with his stuff with DJ John, just having great choruses and great production. Oh, yeah. That stuff I think will always be his best work because, I mean, that stuff was so exciting and so well produced and catchy, and his flow was different on like a lot of the records. Like I remember seeing in one of his albums, maybe Eating Isn't Cheating, he has a quote, he goes, "Nerdcore will rise in 04." He wrote that in his CD. And that was interesting. Like I discovered him because I had a hip hop radio show in college, and there was this kid who was like a graffiti artist. He had a zine. He was like a fan of my show. He came by and he'd burn me CDs of MC Chris and people like that, and Optimus Rhyme and MC Hawking. So I had no idea about it until like, this would have been 2003, January. Yeah. And, I had no idea that it was like a whole movement, but I didn't necessarily ever consider myself that, but I always felt like it was cool to work with these people. And just by virtue of doing what I did, I became lumped into it. And I think that was a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot of people got pulled. Well, I mean, like we said with Raheem, with Ran, like after a point, he's like, okay, I'm going to do this Mega Man album thing, and that was an intentional thing. But I think with you singing so much about literary movements and stuff, because that's what I always English major represent game here. I always that's what I always think of when someone says MC Lars. Immediately I go to Flow Like Poe, or I go that is studious, and thus it's nerdy by definition, I think.
Right, it's nerdy. And it's nerdy to also, fast forwarding to make a Broadway musical about American history, right? Like that.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like the seeds of what all these artists were tapping into were part of the zeitgeist, but always little too weird to ever become mainstream, right? And so
to coalesce,
coalesce. And that's why it was always exciting to have like people like you write about it and have G4 do the segments and have it mentioned in like little sections. And I think that during this time we're talking about, people got very thirsty for the attention, and that's where a lot of the beef came out. And the documentaries, especially Nerdcore for Life. Yeah.
The dueling documentaries. Yeah. When I first was like my first real interview was Frontalot, who started at Ground Zero in Spartanburg with his Nerdcore for Life tour. Where they were also filming the documentary. And you had that, and you had you had Nerdcore Rising and Nerdcore for Life sort of dueling documentaries, which there's nothing more nerdcore than that, is two groups of people doing essentially the same thing and just sort of side-eyeing each other across the aisle the whole time.
Right, and competing for the festivals and the press, but they really came out within a am I right to remember a few months of each other?
Yeah, I think they both dropped in 2008.
Wow. That's crazy. So let's talk about Rhyme Torrents. Like, who from Rhyme Torrents has persisted? Beefy?
Beefy is I don't know. There's just something about Beefy. I like to think that people can't make good art without making bad art, and Beefy is my exception.
Hey.
Because I feel like Beefy kind of came out of the gate as Beefy. Beefy was born fully formed as our beloved Beef Thompson. And I think because of that, he's the guy who's managed to kind of ride it out. And when a lot of people went another way or just sort of gave up the ghost, Beefy has continued beefing it up for the last decade and a half.
And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that his production was always cool. He always had interesting beats. It never sounded bad.
I've got a friend at a Washington that's an audio engineer, and we were talking about this at one point. And he's like, I'm fairly certain that Beefy is the only person I've ever heard sound professional with cracked shareware and a Radio Shack mic. There's just something about the quality. There's something about Beefy's timbre that makes him Beefy. It's a certain kind of magic.
It's like Chuck D, his voice would cut through the crappy speakers, right? Because it was so low.
Yes.
Similar to Beefy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think led to the downfall of that not becoming the dominant zeitgeist of nerdcore? Like, what happened?
Well, like everything, it's born and it lives and it dies. And I think it was just that whole process was sped up just because everybody was so hungry.
Yeah.
Everybody did have, or a lot of people did have sort of an unhealthy element of ego about it. And eventually, things fall apart. The center, as they say, cannot hold.
And because there were so many people and it was this new thing where it was like a community, but also digital distribution and also the torrent technology. It was new that like you could create something in your room and then people would hear it and you're part of a community. And there was a whole army of people, which was, I think, theoretically awesome and was like the birth of Spotify and SoundCloud and all of that stuff. So Z, who are some artists from that second gen that you think could have kept going, had a lot of potential, but just kind of fell off and stopped making music?
I miss Zealous One a lot. Another Cali guy who had a very unique voice.
Yeah.
And then there are people that sort of came into Rhyme Torrents that were never nerdcore to begin with. Like Shell Riley is still being Shell Riley. He's still doing his stuff. He's still working, with Beefy and the Grammar Club. But it's also a little disingenuous to introduce Shell Riley rapper, as that was just a tiny little bit of a thing that he was doing.
Because he's more of a singer, definitely.
He is. He is more of a singer. He is more of a singer-songwriter in the classic sense.
So So after Rhyme Torrents, so we're going over the history. So that so what was when did Rhyme Torrents slow down? 2008, would you say?
It was probably, I think 2009, 2010 was the decline of that. And then by 2011, it was, only a handful of us probably even remembered that it happened.
Yeah. Except other people would see the documentaries too.
Yeah.
And then so if that was the second generation or second wave, what was the third wave? Was there one?
Well, there was a third wave, but it was people who were sort of working outside of that paradigm. A lot of people, Adam Warrock is a perfect example, didn't know anything about Rhyme Torrents. He had been, experimenting with rap and with just kind of music in general for a while, but it wasn't until Eugene On became Adam Warrock that he sort of fell into the nerdcore fold.
So he'd been rapping and he was doing stuff on YouTube. And I guess I remember in 2011, he was opening on the tour with Chris and me and Mega Ran. And
yeah.
How did he get discovered? Just by rapping on YouTube? Do you know?
I don't know. Okay. For anybody who is not familiar with Warrock's story, he was a lawyer, Lars.
Right.
He was a lawyer in
Atlanta or some
he may have still been in Philly at the time.
Okay.
But he's or maybe back in Memphis by that point. But yeah, Adam Warrock goes to law school, gets out, gets what is, I guess on paper, his dream job, and is miserable.
Right.
And he starts making music, maybe not out of desperation, but just out of looking for something more. And because of, I think, the wave that whole second gen nerdcore thing had caused, he eventually starts gaining traction. And I mean, I think he reached out to me at some point. It's like, hey, I've heard your podcast. This is my stuff. This is what I do. And I was like, oh man, this is amazing.
Yeah. And it was well produced. That's what helped him stand out.
It's well produced. And again, he had a podcasting background. Like I think he understood a little bit about, sound and what you're supposed to do with it, which is not a thing that some of us started out with.
Right.
But and again, and he is certainly not second gen Rhyme Torrents era, but it pains me that Eugene is no longer rapping. Like, I understand why he's not. He's kind of moved on. He's doing great in life. He's happy. He's getting married. And maybe that's why all of us create, is because we're just trying to fix something broken in ourselves, and maybe this is fixed.
Right. That's profound.
I hope that's it.
Well, and there's also this thing with, I think with him, that there's all this success super quick, and then it's hard after you're an opener on some of these tours to do it yourself, to headline and grow.
It is, and I just don't think he could. I don't think he could compete with himself. I think his output was so prolific that it was just unsustainable. But that's just him, when he does something, he really, really does it.
That's interesting. And I think he comes up a lot on this podcast as this mythical guy who was so big. I think you're right. He was the face of the third generation. There was really not. And then when he realized nerdcore fans liked him, he embraced that genre.
Yeah. Well, because he was already a big comic book and pop culture guy anyway, so it fit.
Yeah, it wasn't disingenuous.
No.
And there was, talking about the social history, there was not a lot of people of color in nerdcore, and there's no real bigger Asian MCs I can remember.
Well, not at the time. Now, and now I guess we're in the fourth iteration of nerdcore at this point. And we're finally starting, and I think we're finally kind of starting to see that representation, because it's not as niche as it used to be. It's
right.
Technology and culture are so sort of intertwined that it's not. Nerdcore doesn't have to be nerdcore anymore.
Right, that's true. Nerdcore is just. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Is it an asset to even call it that? And
I think a lot of the people that I find that are the happiest with their work and with their output don't care if you want them to be nerdcore, and that's the avenue that you find them. That's great. And if you don't, and you just think that it's just this kind of different hip hop that I listen to, you know what? That's good too.
Yeah,
we can call Lex a Lexicon artist, again, a phenomenal new gen Asian American female artist, nerdcore, or we can say that she's somebody who raps about being a psych major, the construct of self. You know, she takes on a lot of that stuff just as much as she takes on television and video games and pop culture stuff.
And I think she's purposely leveraged the nerdcore brand to help her make money, and that's cool. That was like a thing where seeing her was, she showed up at our show in San Francisco, and I was like, oh, here's someone who sees this as a lane and she's going to use it, because there's so many rappers who don't tour, who just do stuff online. And I think that this became a way for people, like you're talking about, it's a punk rock thing, a model for how you can like make a living at it and actually connect with people. And I think that's cool.
It's an in. It's a great in if you're looking to tour, because, you know, now she's out on the road with Chris and Schaefer the Dark Lord.
Yeah. Who else is new that you think is great?
Oh man, hold on. I've got there's just so much. Well, there's so much stuff going on in sort of nerdy, geeky, weird music across the spectrum. Like you're out with Oakley Dokley. You know,
right, they're awesome.
What a ridiculous and enchanting concept.
Right.
That is.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you not respond? How do you not respond to that?
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's just, and that's another thing. Like there's just so many opportunities because of the SoundCloud and Spotify model. Like if you're doing something, you can put it out there, and that's amazing to me.
And I think you said something interesting about ego. And my wife talks about this a lot, that it's good to be an art burner, meaning you're not precious about your art. You put out a song, you put out another song, you make videos. You don't spend your whole career talking about the great stuff you did in the past, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you compete with the kids.
Well, and if you don't look back at the art that you made previously and cringe just a little bit, have you really grown as an artist? Like, shouldn't it have a sell-by date after a point? Shouldn't there be like Mark Schaefer the Dark Lord has songs that he no longer performs? He's like, yeah, I don't like that. I've grown past that.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to be, just to grow as an artist and as a person, and to realize that the art of the past may not reflect the person of today.
And that proves growth, and that proves that you're trying new things, and it allows your audience to grow, especially on tour.
Yeah.
They don't just want to. I find that problem sometimes. Like I try to do some of my older stuff, but some of my older stuff from The Graduate is like very specific to that time that it hasn't aged well.
And you, again, we were talking about this before the show. Like, so much has changed in your life. You're a married man now, Lars. You know, you are at a completely different phase in your life, and it only makes sense that you would be at a different phase in your artistic life.
Thank you, man. I feel that, and I feel the freedom of it, and I love that I get to like I'm doing these Marvel songs for Patreon now and do this podcast, try other things. But yeah, I think it was a very interesting time for me because I was in my 20s and I've had this way to prove myself, but I also had this conflicted relationship because I always felt like nerdcore traded on novelty, and it wasn't so much about the skills and the musical side of it. And that was always hard for me when I hear certain acts. And I think that's not really the case anymore because skills are so important now.
And that was one of the reasons, again, the you got to make bad art before you make good art was one of the reasons that I tried not to dwell too much on that. But also, like, it's a matter of longevity. A lot of these fly by night guys are gone and forgotten. But here's you, and here's Schaefer. You know, you guys are still doing and making and creating and performing and touring.
And that's tight.
That is, exactly.
And we owe that to the fans. And I think the fans I think we're at this point now where there's this nostalgia, this millennial nostalgia for the early 2000s. And now on the brink of the 20s, it really feels like maybe not that we're at this level at all ever, or will we ever be, but like Black Flag touring in the mid 90s, right?
Yeah.
A throwback thing.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
And when I come to a Lars show, I am never not going to want to hear Hurricane Fresh. But I understand if you are past a point where that's something you want on every set list. Like, you have to realize that artists are people and not jukeboxes, and you have to give them the leverage. If you are a fan, you have to give them the leverage to make the music that they want and need to make and perform it at whatever time you see them.
Yeah, man. And that sometimes a good show will only have one or two songs,
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
I want to come away with new songs that I love. I don't need to hear the old stuff. I've gone to the Iron Maiden tour where they just play the first 6 or 10 albums, and that's great.
Yeah.
But I've also gone and be like, what was that? Was that Fear of the Dark? They're doing Fear of the Dark now? That's part of the live set. Well, all right, well, good. We'll check that out.
Yeah. Brian from Cuckoo Kangaroo is a guy I really love to talk to about this stuff. And he says that bands can decide what their hits are by choosing to play them in their set and really promote them. And that's cool to have the power to do that. And I think I kind of, Mr. Raven and my Poe stuff, I force that into being like something people expect, because I always play that song, and on paper that might not seem like a hit that people want to hear, but I was so determined, and I think like that's a cool example. Or like Mega Ran doing the Final Fantasy stuff, like that's what I like about nerdcore. If you care about something and you genuinely want to present it, it sticks, and that's dope.
Yeah,
that's special.
Well, and there are always going to be, whether it's culturally or whether it has to do with the personalities of the people involved, there's always going to be an element that's problematic or annoying, or that doesn't sit well with you, and you can either work through that or you can move past it. Like, those are your two options. Nobody is trapped in any artistic bubble that they don't let themselves be trapped in.
Yes, that's true. And I think that, oh man, we could talk about, we'll see how controversial this gets. We can edit this out, but I don't know if you've been following recent beef online between some people. And what are your thoughts on that without naming people?
I try to ignore it. And that for me, and this is funny and a thing that I don't talk about much, but I've figured out that I respond a lot better to the art made by people, in and around the sort of nerdcore sphere, when I am not completely directly involved with them all the time.
Right.
Like, I can't as a 43-year-old man who's made a promise to himself to not fight with people about music on the internet anymore. That was Lars, that's a gift I gave myself when I turned 40. I was like, you don't have to do that anymore, man. You've
what a gift.
Paid your time. Like, I try to stay out of that, but because of the fact that it's social media 24/7, you're still going to see it. So of course I'm in on it. And I'm like, just let people think what they want. Don't get so dragged down by how this person does or does not interact with you or your scene or your community in a way that pleases you. It's not all about you. It's going to be okay. These are the things I tell my children every day. It's not all about you. It's probably going to work out all right. Don't forget to eat breakfast.
And brush your teeth.
Brush your teeth.
If you are annoyed by someone not caring about you, who you respect, you give that person power. You
do.
And then it just becomes an endless cycle. And because I'm tagged in a lot of this stuff, I just try to stay out of it. And I know whenever I've expressed opinions, the few times people write MC Lars diss songs and I get dragged in the mud, and I'm like, I just, the only thing I connect with in it is that I own the nerdcoretour.com domain, which I post my dates on. And when we're doing like a Mount Rushmore tour, we play that up. But I think for my own sanity, it's like, it's exhausting. It's really, it's like toxic. But anyway, yeah. So
well,
I think advice is just people just relax and.
Exactly. It's fandom culture writ large, and I don't care if you are a nerdcore guy or a Simpsons guy or a classic Dungeons and Dragons guy. There are always going to be people in there that are throwing sand and that are unhappy of the shape and tone of X. And okay, be mad. Good for you. This is what you've chosen to expend your energy on, and I'm not going to help you.
and it's not going to make you more credible. You know, you spend more time making music and videos because that's the key to any success, I guess.
Exactly. Just make art that you like and do constructive things with it. Bottom line.
Are you familiar with this concept called the Peter Principle?
Vaguely.
So it's this idea that you rise to your highest level of incompetence.
Yes.
So if you're mad that your career has not gone a certain way, try writing more music, try doing better produced music, try changing up your show. Like, I feel like a lot of artists and that applies to me too. Whenever I felt frustrated, I'm like, well, I should try something new or learn a new technology or switch to another platform. I think that like that applies to music. And I wonder if that applies to you as a journalist. Like,
yeah, I think so. It's so easy to get bent out of shape about how this person is doing better than you, or this person who's, one of your favorites isn't at the top where they should be, that you kind of lose where you are artistically. And you kind of lose sight of your good fortune. I mean, I get to, and I still have a day job, of course, but I get to go to shows and play video games and write about it, and that's amazing. That's all I've ever wanted to do. From like an early age, all I ever wanted to do was tell stories, and after a point, I realized that everything is a story. Every experience, every song you hear, every place you go is a story, and I had to learn to kind of carve those out of whatever big blocks of stone were in my way.
That's poetic. Right. And the fact that you care about telling story and other people's stories and piecing stories together. And like you said, you were an English major like me. That's cool.
Well, I was an English major that just got weird tattoos and ended up writing instead of finishing.
What did you want to do as an English major? Like, what was your reason for picking that?
Just because I liked words. I liked the power of language. I tried to focus a lot on American lit. Like that's I think that's part of the reason why the new album spoke to me so much, because I'm like, oh, Washington Irving, that's my boy.
Yeah. It's a lot of American lit on that record.
A lot of American lit. A lot of I think it was just that sort of art for art's sake movement. We can have a story and we can have a moral, but people have to enjoy the way we get there.
Yeah.
That really kind of changed my approach to writing. Well, that and Dungeons and Dragons changed my approach to writing too, but that's...
Well, let's talk about that. How so? That's cool.
There is, again, I'm, as you can tell from the accent, uniquely Southern. And there is this tradition of the Southern, especially the Southern man, as a storyteller. And growing up, I could never find that. I was always around, my grandfather's a perfect example. I was always around these people that could spin these yarns, that could tell you what happened on third shift at the mill the night before last. And as pedestrian as it was, you would be riveted.
Right.
And I could never get there. I could never find my story until, in my kind of preteens, I stumbled across role-playing games and comic books and that sort of pop culture sensibility. And I was like, oh, these are stories too. And that's kind of how I learned to tell a story, was by those examples.
That's cool. And the imagination, important.
And the imagination. And that's how I ended up with a D20 tattoo that got me a job writing for the Wired blog. So it all comes around.
That's cool. That's interesting. I had never thought of that. Do you think it comes from the Black tradition of the griot, like the storytelling?
I do, and I think it also comes from a place where when you are from and even up until sort of post-Depression in the South, like literacy rates were appalling. So the tradition of oral storytelling has just sort of endured. Like you see it in the, goofy, stereotypical Southern television preacher.
Right.
There's this sort of bombast and this timbre, and I think it's just a cultural thing.
And the musicality of the accent.
Yes, that too. And man, it took me so long to just be okay with the way that I sound as a person.
Right.
Because historically, Southern's not necessarily well represented in pop culture, and I know a couple of Cletus like John Yokels, so I can't complain. But that was another thing that I discovered through music. I remember hearing Tom Petty and being like, oh my God, this guy's from rural Florida, but listen to this cool story he's telling me.
Yeah.
Later in the 90s, it was Outkast. It's like you can go to a gas station in Smyrna, Georgia, and hear somebody that talks like Big Boy. Like, I was like, oh, I know where these guys are from.
Yeah.
They're from down here too. Listen to this amazing lyricism.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. And that's why Southern rap always has both musicality and great storytelling.
Yeah, that's
special.
And it's great that now rap is big enough to not just be two coasts. And I think that to me, for rap, either underground or commercial, like that's the best thing about it in its modern incarnation, is you can be a rapper from anywhere. You can be you can be the Ghetto Boys, or you can be Nas. You can be from somewhere everybody knows or a place no one's ever heard of before.
And you don't have to be in a city. You could just do it on your computer.
Exactly. You can be the Dungeon Family. You can do it on a dirt floor underneath a mill house, which I'm looking down into my basement right now, which is a dirt floor underneath a mill house.
I have two more questions. What Southern nerdcore rappers are there that like from the? I'm not talking North Carolina. I'm talking like Southern. I always.
Are there any? There are a few. For me, I always go with my buddy Niles. Tribe One.
There you go.
Tribe is out of Atlanta. He has a certain West Coast sensibility that he's never been able to shake. But you're right. He's
the king probably of Southern nerdcore.
And plus, Niles to me is one of those guys. I tend to think of you guys in the same breath, just because you are just the nicest, most down to earth, like guys you want to hang out with after a show.
That's nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, again, you gotta big up the good guys, because life often does not. So, right.
Niles is definitely a great person.
He is. Well, again, and so much has changed in the last decade. He too is married. They've got a kid. Like, his life is grown, and you just wish everybody all the best.
Yeah, that's cool. Niles, and then there's of course like Sky Blue and Michael Kill, and that's why I want to exclude North Carolina.
Yeah, and it's and even Niles to an extent, as a person that I'm so tight with that I have to make sure I don't big up him too much, because like Michael Kill and Sulfur, like I see those, well, not as much as I used to, just because it's been a busy last 6 or 8 months. But like, I know those guys. I've been to those guys' houses. I know their wives and children and girlfriends and stuff. Like their family. That whole sort of no friends clique. Those are my people.
They're friends.
They are.
Their name is misleading.
Their name, ironically enough, they're my friends. I know that's not what it says on the flyer, but.
What about Florida? I guess there's Emergency Pizza Party. Yeah, that's kind of dispersed, right?
Well, Florida and Seattle were both really synonymous with that second gen nerdcore. Like, that's true. You still have guys like EPP, like Funky 49, that are still doing some stuff in Florida, but it is not. I don't think it's the bastion of nerdcore that it once was, and a lot of that is because of the dissolution of Nerdapalooza. I think that really kind of grounded the scene to an extent.
And people were like moving to Orlando for that.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that's interesting. And the story there, to continue our oral history, is they hired bands they thought would help grow the festival exponentially that ended up bankrupting them.
Yeah, and I was there. I was there as it was happening. And even though I was more privy to it than most.
Yeah.
But even just sort of knowing a little bit, like you could just feel that something was going down. Like it felt like the end.
And that's what talking about punk rock, it's always outside of the music industry. So some of these people didn't have experience with like, just because a band costs 50 grand or whatever, doesn't mean they're going to make you 100 grand.
Exactly.
And it's not the band's fault. I feel like a lot of people in that narrative want to blame a specific headliner, but it's not their fault.
It's not, and it's not their fault for needing to be paid for their services.
Yeah.
That's capitalism, friends, and that's just how it works.
And that's, yeah.
It ain't a perfect system, but it's the one we got.
And it also, when you're that big and you have a crew and you have expenses, most of that goes to the overhead of the project. So, it's interesting, man. Like, that's kind of interesting end note to between the third and fourth generation is that if Nerdapalooza had stayed at the Social and the Beecham or whatever, it would have, I think, still been doing theater sizes. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that it could have been a solid 1 or 2 mid-size house event by now, but like everything, and I'm sure there's plenty of blame to go around to everyone involved, and it's no use pointing fingers, but the center cannot hold, things fall apart. And it was on its way to expanding, because I liked how towards the end it wasn't just rap. Really, rap had become so small. Well, and that's sort of a thing that I've been doing kind of since the earliest days of my writing was, well, okay, if you like MC Lars, then clearly you're a person who's interested in literature. Have you tried Darkest of the Hillside Thickets? If you like Megaran, obviously you're a video game guy. Have you listened to the crew from the Overclocked Remix project? Like, we were finally getting to a point where there was a lot of cross pollination, which just makes it kind of all the sadder that it went out when it did.
Yeah, and now it's the bigger people, like the Generation 5, who probably were doing it for a while, are the YouTubers like Dan Bull and like the Completionist, like these people who really have millions of followers on YouTube because they had great production, and the nerdcore fan base has found that because it's not just dudes in their 40s who remember rap. It's young kids.
After a point, and that's another thing about sort of like nerdcore infighting, like after a point you have to realize, I'm rapidly becoming a middle-aged man, and not everything is for me. I'm not the target audience for this. If I don't get it, it's by design.
Right, and it's a miracle that certain things like Sonic and Pokemon and Mario have lasted. Therefore, these people still write about it, and that's inspiring. That's cool. It's exciting.
I went to, it was the Nintendo Switch event, the big sort of first hands-on 2-3 Januaries ago in Manhattan. Nintendo flew me up and showed me a good time and brought us down in the middle of the night to watch the simulcast from Japan. And I remember there was like me and a handful of other bloggers and a couple of like sort of more classic outfits. So there was a guy, buddy of mine from Paste magazine out of Atlanta was there. But the bulk of the kids, I say quote unquote, were YouTubers. And I was like, well, see, this is how it goes. I remember when I was the one blogger in a room full of magazine and newspaper writers, and now I'm in this little, in the corner, and the new guys are coming out, and good for them, because we got to move forward.
And good for them for being able to preserve the nerd culture and being part of it. I remember the last Warped Tour I did, 2015, they had a YouTuber tent where people would just meet the YouTubers. That was like the biggest thing at Warped Tour. The kids wanted to meet them.
My children are way more impressed when I meet a YouTuber than the fact that, I'm hanging out with like indie musicians or, getting to play video games for work and stuff. Like that's cultural currency to them. Those are their guys and their girls.
That's the new rock stars.
Yeah.
And that's tight.
and I don't watch Let's Plays. I don't get it because it's not for me. And that's okay. All content doesn't have to be made for me. I can find stuff that I like.
Yeah. And that's what's up. Like such as the Hipster Please podcast. And I wanted to ask you, so the last thing I wanted to ask you, Z, is what advice might you have for young journalists? That stuff that's worked for you that that you learned that maybe you wish you'd known as a kid?
I think we have the old adage of write what you know, and there's some truth to that, but you have to learn. If you want to write what you know, you have to continually be learning new things. Like, don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone a little bit. And the best way to go out of your comfort zone is to look at something and be like, okay, this is something I'm interested in that's maybe a little unrelated. And you kind of ease into that, just find things that spark your interest. And if you get into it and you realize there's no passion there, then find another thing that sparks your interest.
Keep growing.
You gotta keep growing. And, there's so many ways to approach writing that you kind of have to find yours. Right. Maybe you're the next, gonzo journalist. Maybe you are the next Legs McNeil, and you won't know until you find your thing, and don't be afraid to look for it.
That's cool. So take chances. Don't specialize too much that you become limited, right?
That's right. And get weird tattoos and start a podcast.
And meet Doc Pop.
And meet Doc Pop. Hang out with Doc Pop. That's right. Get a big sweaty hug from Beefy. If I could give one piece of advice to everybody here in podcast land, it's hug Beefy. He's huggable, that guy.
Best hugs in the game. That's interesting, Z, because that was kind of my point when I did my first RIP Nerdcore blog 12 years ago. I was saying
say a million years ago.
So it doesn't even matter. My most viewed blog I ever posted, where my point was exactly what you said. I wasn't trying to talk about how the art was going to die. I was talking about how you needed to listen to things other than Nerdcore to create good music. How it's very important to not try to do a carbon copy of this thing that I felt like could be a carbon copy of authentic rap. And And I think people listen, whether they listen to it or not. The case now is that there's so much brilliant creativity because by necessity, streaming services and the internet have forced people to step outside their comfort zone. And with writing too, I think that's like cool advice. It's good advice.
Well, it is, and it's there are always going to be those people that come up to you and say, I don't like rap. And those are the people that you say, oh, you don't like rap, but you enjoy Mega Ran. Oh, well, have you heard? Just have your ducks lined up, have your suggestions on hand, because those are exactly the kind of people that you want to encourage to branch out into other artists and other music. You should like, maybe not all kinds of music, but you should like most kinds of music because it's beautiful and it's variable and there's so much depth and breadth and color to it. And, music is as cliche as it sounds. Music continues to save my life and to help make it more worth living and to really kind of color it and just help keep me entertained and centered and going when times get rough.
Amen. That's the same with me, man. And I think I've come to peace with if someone only likes Nerdcore, because I know a lot of people who come to see our tours might not go to other tours. That's okay. There's no shame in liking something very familiar, very comfortable. But you're right. Maybe it's a good excuse for, oh, well, you like this? Maybe you'll like Kendrick Lamar. Oh, with Hamilton, now that's like such a great lightning bolt. Somebody wants to just go to a No Friend show and they're like, man, I really enjoyed Michael Kill. My response is, oh man, me and Kill went to the most amazing Ghetto Boy show at a dive bar in Charlotte a couple years ago. Let me tell you about it. And let me tell you about how we connected to this music that we grew up with. Yeah.
And that's a true story. And Bushwick Bill got on the bar at one point. And I am not a religious man, Lars, but I understood church because it was just 75 of us packed in there. And we were just all feeling it, and it was great. And that's music. That's why you go to shows. That's why you buy records for moments like that.
It is, yeah. It's spiritual, and that same vibe is why people go to church, right?
Yeah,
it feels something
exactly.
in your heart.
It's a connection with your fellow humans.
Just like this hour has been us connected with each other.
It is, man. Lars, it was so great to catch up with you, man. I miss you so much. I will definitely, the next time you're within driving distance, I will definitely be there.
Thanks, buddy. Well, I miss you too, and hopefully I'm going to be doing some stuff early next year, so hopefully we could get to Spartanburg even. That would be a trip.
I was gonna say, man, hey, do Charlotte, me, Kill, and Sulphur, all the boys will show up.
That would be an honor. That would be tight. Thank you, bro. Where can we send people to follow all your prodigious output?
As I said, most of my writing now takes place at geekdad.com, and you can check out my podcast, which is about to hit its 99th episode, at hipsterpolice.com.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I had the podcast and I did well over 100 episodes kind of back in the day, and then I took a couple of years off and I kind of decided to reboot it a few years ago. So I'm about to cross 100 again, which is still fun. It's still kind of magic, this arbitrary number that we have agreed is important because it's triple digits.
Soon you'll hit 1,000 quadruple digits.
Maybe. We'll see.
Let's end with a song. Do you have a favorite nerdcore song? What a question. I totally put you on the spot.
Oh, do I have a favorite nerdcore song? Okay.
Because we'll end with it.
We will. We were talking about Word Burglar, and when I was going through kind of a really rough time in my life, Berg dropped Third Burglar, which was his third LP, because he's clever. And there is a track on there called Yobaseo that uses, if I am not mistaken, sort of a pitch-shifted version of the Moon music from DuckTales, the NES game. But it is lyrically, it is a song about, it sort of juxtaposes loneliness and connection. And the hook is anybody out there, please don't say no. And it was just one of those tracks that I go back to every time that I'm feeling alone or isolated. I mean, it always helps me. And if you haven't heard it, I hope you dig it. If you have heard it, cool. I hope you dig it too.
This is and didn't Michael Keel sample the Moon music too?
Oh man, let me tell you, that one is well worn. That is a popular little MIDI to pull in.
And speaking of Hamilton, Lin-Manuel said it was his favorite piece of video game music of all time.
It's gorgeous. If you go to repositories like the Overclocked Remix Project, you will find so many iterations of that. Just because it's iconic, it's beautiful. It's just an amazing melody, and the fact that they were doing it on this tiny, insignificant little sound chip, and we're still talking about it decades later.
What? Real quick, Overclocked Remix Project. I've heard people talk about it. What is that?
Overclocked Remix Project was another one of these early internet musical communities where basically started out by a guy named DJ Pretzel and some of his friends, but people reimagine and reorchestrate music from video games. Sometimes they do it as instrumental stuff. Sometimes they do it as beats to rap over. Sometimes they make metal covers or they turn it into a samba. It's just sort of the breadth of creativity of a lot of these kind of bedroom producers. And the coolest part is, over the ensuing years, a lot of these guys have gone on to make video game music professionally.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Is it like Creative Commons, or it's just like, what's the legality of it? They just give it away so they don't have to clear it?
They give it away. They do. They always credit the original composers.
Cool.
And it's just completely fan based and fan run, and it's amazing. Anytime I don't know what to listen to, I just go to OCR and see what they're kicking out.
Are they still active?
Oh yeah. It's still out there, and you've got stuff going back. Going back to that 2007, 2008, 2009 golden age of nerdy music.
Okay, well, I recommend that. It sounds like a cool resource. I'm going to check that out too. This is the Word Burglar song from Third Burglar, and the name of it is, again,
Yobaseo.
Z, thank you. This has been awesome.
Lars, thank you so much, man. It is great to talk to you. And congratulations on your not too distant nuptials. I know you're still relatively recently married, and I hadn't got to tell you that in person. So congratulations to you and your beautiful family.
Thank you. Congratulations to you too, Z. I'll talk to you soon.
You're welcome.
smasher, y'all screw data. Mass crusader, the innovator, new beta. Strange truth like Labor Day, you don't do labor. Too major, drinking brews at the bodega with a megaphone strapped to his face to go blega. Yo, Sam, yo, 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 Sam, is anybody out there? Please don't say no. I'm out in space trying to figure out a way home. Holla if you hear me. Yo, Sam, yo, Sam, yo, 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 Sam, is anybody out there? Please don't say no. I'm out in space trying to figure out a way home. Holla if you hear me. Yo, Sam. You can't tell me I'm not in space. Just like the people in P60. You can't tell me I'm not in space. Just like the people in P60. You can't tell me I'm not in space. Green Lantern. Green Lantern.
Oh, what a great Word Burglar song. I had not heard that, but I know that DuckTales theme is classic, and that was a great choice. Z, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, for your insight. You could tell that dude is like a very humble, sweet, kind person, and he's done a lot for the scene. So hipsterplease.com, check out his podcast, check out his work. Z, thank you very much. We have another special friend, speaking of great people. This is my friend Chris, who called and left a message on the Patreon hotline because he's this week's MC Lars. Patreon Larson of the week.
Hey, this is Chris Barnett from Akron, Ohio, and I wanted to leave a memory, a fun MC Lars memory that I had. But there are so many, it's hard to choose from. We've known Lars for a long time, and I think what's so cool are all the friendships, even more than just a single memory, or all the great friendships that we've made through MC Lars as he spreads those joyful smiles. People like Adam Pierce from Portland, and Kosha Dill, Mega Ran, and Ryan and Neil from Cuckoo Kangaroo, who've become really good friends of ours over the years, and all the way from the guys from Skyfox, when we first met MC Lars years and years ago, Johnny, Matt, John, and Mike. But if I had to choose a memory, I'd have to say there's two. One is the wild juxtaposition of seeing my 10-year-old Maddox at Fun Fest with MC Lars dancing on stage with SZA from Leftover Crack. It's just one of those moments that a father can't even believe, to see his kid up there with someone like SZA. Both just having the time of their life there in Austin. But I'd have to say my favorite memory, though, was from Vans Warped Tour 2015, when MC Lars came through Cleveland, Ohio, and gave us a call when he was finished for the day and said he wanted to hang out. And we went out for ice cream afterwards, and there was this, the retail person, the person taking our order, saw that we were wearing Vans Warped Tour gear. And she was so disappointed that she didn't get to go. She had to work that day. And she was really bummed out because she wanted to see her favorite artist, MC Lars. And my son said, well, he's right here. And she realized that she was actually serving up ice cream for Lars. She just filled with joy and like burst into not joyful smiles, but joyful tears that MC Lars actually showed up right there where she worked, even though she had to go into work that day and had to miss his show. And she had one of his CDs in her purse, and she got to get an autograph from him, and it just made her day, totally out of the blue, totally unexpected. Serendipitously, MC Lars was right there, and she had a great day. So that's my memory. My favorite MC Lars memory. Thank you, Lars. Keep spreading those joyful smiles. Love you, brother.
Oh, man, that's a great story. Thank you, Chris. You know what I love about this podcast is that I always wanted to kind of write memoirs or something like that. You know, I'd done a lot of book pitches over the years trying to talk about the indie rap revolution, the internet revolution, whatever you call it, wherever I fit in the music world and these stories and everything. I've always wanted to document all these cool stories and like tell the stories of all my friends. And I feel like this podcast does that. And I think like that story that Chris told, it's a great one because I'd forgotten about it, but I remember how fun and random that was, like meeting that girl and getting to sign her CD. It was just really random. And I just feel very blessed. And at this point, I'm looking at the SoundCloud playlist. There's 86 hours of me talking to my friends. And I don't plan on stopping. Like 62 episodes. I want to do hundreds. And it's just, this has been a great medium. So thank you everyone who's been listening and supporting part of this digital archive of this moment in time. And yeah, I get kind of emotional talking about it. And it's been so cool being able to go to places like Russia and play places like New Zealand and Australia and Japan and Amsterdam and Canada. It's just Alaska, Hawaii. I don't know. I feel blessed. And I want to share the secrets of this DIY vision. So that's just a little macro perspective I wanted to leave at the end of the podcast. Next week, I talked to Rappy McRapperson. He came to my show in Bellingham, Washington, with Oakley Dokley, and we talked about his life. He was like an early Napster comedy rapper, and I learned that he was signed to the label that put out Robot Kills, Oleo. I learned that he signed Wing, who's the woman who was on South Park, and he produced a few records for her. And I learned he did the original Captain Underpants theme song. So it's a great interview with a very artistic, interesting, unique guy, Rappy McRapperson. Check out his stuff. It's not necessarily safe for work, but it's definitely brilliant. And I'll see you then. Thank you all for listening. Take care. Peace. Oh yeah, by the way, this is your friend MC Lars.